The galactic bazaar on Epsilon 7 thrummed like a living thing. Corridors of vendors, stalls hung with alien wares, and a million voices bargaining in tongues that echoed off metal and light. Neon signs flickered above crates of Vexian glowworms and Therilian crystal beetles. Merchants hawked spices that smelled like storms, and collectors in long cloaks traded rumors of salvage and lost relics. Yet tucked into a narrow corner of the exotic livestock row, hidden behind a stack of battered crates, sat a tiny enclosure that most passers-by ignored, not from malice but from habit. The galaxy moved quickly. It had no patience for things that could not pull their own weight. Inside that enclosure, curled into a ball no larger than a house cat, was a dragon hatchling. Her copper scales were tarnished and flaking, a soft rusted sheen that failed to catch the shop lights. One wing hung at an odd, useless angle, the membrane torn, knitting in a way that made anyone who understood biology wince. Even worse, a cough rattled in her chest when she breathed. Her eyes, though golden and old beyond her weeks, scanned the crowd with the same quiet hope every abandoned creature carries, hope that bled into resignation when no one stopped. The stall's owner, a Vescary merchant whose gill slits pulsed with impatience, kept his gaze on his data pad. He called them defective merchandise the way a butcher calls second-rate cuts: blunt, factual, and profitable. Dragon bloodline, yes, he told skeptical buyers. But look at that wing. She'll never fly. Never breathe proper fire. What use is a crippled dragon? The crowd murmured and moved on. The merchant quoted inflated prices and then fell to bargaining when the interest evaporated. When a human mechanic named Braxton wandered past, he almost kept going too, grease-stained overalls, hands scarred by years of small burns, hair permanently asking for more sleep than his schedule allowed. But something halted him, the way light snagged on the hatchling's copper and the resigned glint in her ancient eyes. Braxton had a weakness for broken things: ships with snapped frames, gadgets with one missing screw, lives scorched by hard luck. He asked the price. The Vescary sniffed, surprise and irritation, and tossed out a number that reeked of contempt: 300 credits. Braxton countered quietly, the kind of human stubbornness that confuses more established species. The merchant haggled, showing irritation when pushed. She's dying in that cage, he said, then wavered as Braxton stayed steady. Eventually, embarrassed and pragmatic, the Vescary relented. 75. No refunds if she dies on you. Braxton transferred the credits with fingers that smelled faintly of lubricant and old coffee, opened the enclosure, and extended a grease-smudged palm. The hatchling, who had learned that hope translates poorly in markets, did not stir. Then, almost as if summoned by genuine concern rather than pity, she crawled onto his hand and focused on him the way a soul recognizes a sanctuary. They arrived at the bazaar's medical wing with the kind of urgency that whispers gossip through corridors. Braxton carrying the small, inert weight in his palm and Valentina's reputation already racing ahead of them. 17 minutes after the purchase, Valentina pushed through the swinging doors, every inch of her composed and sharp, an alertness that betrayed a scientist's mind and a smuggler's pragmatism. Midnight black hair framed a face that missed nothing. Eyes like twin probes scanned the hatchling and then Braxton. Her half-smile said what a social contract often did between them, scolding folded with relief. "Please tell me you didn't," she said. Braxton grinned in the human way of men who would always choose the stray. "I absolutely did." Valentina moved fast, slipping professional tools into place. A medical tricorder that hummed with diagnostic threads, an older protocol she'd installed months before for one of those rare, archaic signals. The hatchling's symptoms assembled themselves on the display: malnutrition, gasping breaths, bone density that had atrophied, and a respiratory infection insisting on attention. Valentina's lip twitched at the wing. The torn membrane would not heal on its own and the bones required support. Then she read the species tag and froze, that professional mask cracking to reveal genuine astonishment. "By the void," she breathed. "Do you know what this is?" She named it and in the same breath, laid a weight on their shoulders. Draconus stellaris. Extinct. 2,000 years gone. If her identification was correct, this hatchling might not just be rare, she might be the last. When Braxton asked what the hatchling had whispered to herself in the cages, that old, soft chirp the universal translators turned into static, Valentina flicked a switch on her tricorder. A module she'd installed months ago for dead dialects hummed awake, the old tongue of the dragons. The hatchling's sound aligned with characters and a soft, sorrowful translation blinked on the screen: "Nobody wants me." The word struck Braxton harder than any diagnostic readout. Valentina's hand went to the hatchling's flank, fingers gentle. "We'll help," she said, but the plan was already forming faster than speech. Stabilize the infection, rebuild the wing membrane, a skeletal rehab protocol, stem cell therapies to kickstart regrowth, and a nutrient program designed for rapid bone reinforcement. They prepped a surgical bay. Braxton, who understood mechanical things better than med speak, scrubbed in and read Valentina's precise instructions like a repair manual. She moved with the concentrated intensity that had made her a sought xenobiologist across 3 sectors. Scalpel in an efficient hand, synthetic scaffolding ready on a tray, stem cell cultures chilled and annotated. Time contracted. Outside the bay, the station's market noise continued, indifferent. Inside, their focus narrowed to one fragile heartbeat. The hatchling, once a small figure of despair in a market cage, was now a patient on the brink of being rewritten. The operation stretched into hours that blurred into a single continuous motion. 6 hours of steady hands, whispered adjustments, and scientific improvisation. Valentina orchestrated the procedure the way a conductor would a complex orchestra. Each instrument precise, each movement deliberate. Braxton played the role of a skilled assistant, passing instruments, holding suction, and improvising stabilizing clamps from parts he kept in a grease-streaked toolbox because life aboard a station demanded creative engineering. The team rebuilt the torn wing membrane with a layered approach. Synthetic scaffolding formed the structural backbone while genetically matched cells, harvested and coaxed from the hatchling's own tissues, seeded the scaffold to encourage organic regeneration. Valentina's stem cell protocols were old science refined by years of fieldwork. She coaxed dormant growth with biochemical encouragement and micro-oscillations that simulated flight stresses. They fought the respiratory infection with a focused pharmacological cocktail, and the nutrient plan they slid beneath the hatchling's tongue during the post-op hours aimed directly at rebuilding bone density and immune resilience. Every monitor beeped like a metronome in a room where time was both ally and enemy. Braxton whispered casual stories, about a gravity plate that once started spinning like a toy, about a morning he'd brewed coffee and dropped the cup into open space. Not because the hatchling understood the anecdotes but because human voices stitched presence into the world. When the dragon stirred, slow and disoriented, she found herself not in a slab of market metal but in a warm recovery bay, soft bedding, steady light, and a smell that suggested someone had cooked something meant to comfort rather than feed. Braxton knelt at her side with a bowl of specially prepared meat and a hand that trembled more from relief than fear. He offered the bowl and she ate. It was the first proper meal she'd had in weeks, not scraps but nutrition chosen to help bones knit and lungs clear. As she chewed, she flicked her tail and cocked her golden, ancient eyes at him. Safe. The sensation sank into her like a tide after a drought. Valentina watched from the doorway, arms crossed but smiling, the healer's exhaustion softened into satisfaction. Braxton spoke to her in the low, steady cadence he used on stubborn machinery, narrating the small, mundane details of station life. The hatchling listened as if cataloging a different species of warmth, conversation. That night, with a repaired wing resting in an engineered brace and medication humming through slow-release patches, the dragon chirped in the old tongue and Valentina's translator hummed back the single word that landed heavier than any medical chart: home. Braxton's gloved hand stroked her copper scales as if affirming the translation. Home, he echoed, simple and solemn. The word settled over the recovery bay like a seal. 3 months folded past faster than the station's cargo manifests. In the weeks that followed the operation, the hatchling, newly named by the pair as much by habit as affection, grew stronger at a pace that startled even seasoned xenobiologists. Her repaired wing moved with increasing confidence, then strength. Where a torn membrane had once drooped, there now ran a pattern of copper and new tissue that gleamed when she flexed. The respiratory infection receded beneath antibiotics and conditioning. The nutrient regimen stiffened bone and fed muscle. She learned to flap, then to leap, and then to fly in short bright arcs above the maintenance bays where Braxton's tools lay like small monuments to patience and repair. Word spread. The Epsilon 7 Bazaar, always hungry for a new story to trade alongside goods, took to telling the tale in whispers that swelled to shouts. The human mechanic and the dragon who melts bulkheads, traders said between transactions, exaggerating the hatchling's developing talents. Fire breath powerful enough to weld panels, speed to race cargo shuttles along a run, and a loyalty that bent the rules of the market. People made pilgrimages, kids pressed their faces to viewport glass to see the copper sheen, retired pilots nodded at her maneuvers like critics at a performance, and even some of the more jaded merchants found themselves smiling when she landed on Braxton's shoulder and settled there like a worn tool finally returned to its owner. For Braxton and Valentina, the small stage of that legend mattered less than the day-to-day changes. How she slept with one wing tucked around Braxton's neck, how she guarded the small workshop against would-be thieves with a bellow that startled even seasoned smugglers, how she learned to tilt her head at the right moment to accept a treat. Their kindness was not a dramatic act in the galaxy's ledger, it was a practice. Braxton, who had earned his scars keeping the station alive, saw in her a reflection of what he'd always tried to fix. Not things as they were, but as they could become. Valentina, whose life straddled labs and shadow routes, found in the hatchling a patient that returned the favor with simple, wholehearted trust. The station learned a lesson in small increments. A species that prized efficiency and perfection noticed the value in something rebuilt and reintroduced. They watched as a defective life became a force of wonder and loyalty. Traders exchanged credits for curiosities, but stories like this one earned a different currency: hope. In the mechanical hum of Epsilon 7, under lights that reflected off copper scales polished by human hands, the dragon's chirp of home became a little louder, and with it, a small corner of the galaxy learned to look at broken things and imagine what they might become.